Trade wars are no longer just political theater or headline drama. America's closest allies are now quietly exposing vulnerabilities that could impact food prices, financial markets, manufacturing, and even the future cost of vehicles across North America. Canada controls critical agricultural lifelines tied directly to U.S. farming, while Europe is studying strategic American weak spots involving semiconductors, medicine, and industrial infrastructure. At the same time, hundreds of billions of dollars in allied investment capital may no longer be guaranteed to stay inside the United States economy. Welcome back to your ultimate pit stop, Piston Pundit, and here are the developments now reshaping the global balance of economic power. America's potash crisis, farming lifeline exposed. For decades, the United States proudly projected itself as an agricultural titan capable of feeding enormous portions of the global population. But underneath that reputation sits a major vulnerability many Americans rarely think about: potash fertilizer. Modern farming depends heavily on potash because it strengthens crops, improves yields, and helps maintain large-scale food production efficiency. Without it, operating costs rise fast while harvest output drops hard. The problem is that America imports over 90% of its potash supply, with most of it coming directly from Canada. That effectively gives Canadian suppliers enormous leverage over U.S. agriculture. Germany is reportedly studying this dependency closely as trade tensions intensify, especially since German fertilizer giant K+S operates major mining assets in Saskatchewan. Meanwhile, Canada's global dominance is expanding further through nutrient growth and BHP's massive Janssen project. For American farmers already battling inflation, equipment costs, fuel prices, and labor shortages, this dependency is becoming impossible to ignore. But fertilizer is only one side of the pressure equation. Once agriculture enters the geopolitical battlefield, financial leverage usually follows close behind, and Canada may already hold another card Washington cannot easily replace. Canada's $733 billion investment weapon, Washington alarmed. While headlines continue focusing on tariffs and supply chain disputes, a far bigger issue is quietly developing beneath the surface: Canadian investment exposure inside the United States economy. According to U.S. Commerce Department figures, Canadian companies and pension funds hold roughly $733 billion invested across American markets. That makes Canada one of the largest foreign investors supporting the U.S. economy today. These investments stretch across infrastructure, transportation, utilities, real estate, private equity, technology, and manufacturing projects. Major pension giants like CPPIB, OMERS, OTPP, CDPQ, PSP Investments, AIMCO, and HOOP are deeply embedded throughout America's financial system. But the political environment is shifting rapidly. Prime Minister Mark Carney is now pushing stronger domestic investment initiatives through the Canada Strong Fund, targeting AI infrastructure, LNG expansion, critical minerals, Arctic shipping routes, semiconductors, and manufacturing growth. Even a modest reallocation of Canadian capital could redirect tens of billions back into domestic projects. The real concern for Washington is not an overnight collapse, but a gradual long-term shift away from U.S. markets as allies increasingly rethink strategic dependence on America. And Canada is not the only ally quietly reassessing America's long-term stability. Across the Atlantic, Europe has reportedly begun identifying strategic pressure points that could become even more consequential than fertilizer or investment capital. Europe's hidden leverage, America's weak spots revealed. While Washington spent years pressuring Europe over defense, trade, and technology restrictions, European leaders were quietly conducting strategic reviews of America's own vulnerabilities. And the findings are far more serious than many expected. European pharmaceutical firms reportedly supply critical ingredients tied to nearly half of branded medicines sold in the United States, including much of the insulin-related supply chain relied upon daily by millions of Americans. The leverage extends into semiconductors as well. Dutch giant ASML, alongside German firms Zeiss and Trumpf, dominates advanced lithography and precision chip-making equipment essential for modern processors. Without these systems, cutting-edge semiconductor production slows dramatically. Even the AI boom depends heavily on European electrical systems, cooling technologies, and industrial automation. Meanwhile, Europe's massive consumer market and trillions invested in US assets give the EU powerful financial influence few Americans fully appreciate. Before we move into the biggest geopolitical implication of all this, do us a favor and smash that like and subscribe button. It really helps Piston Pundit reach more gearheads, policy watchers, and auto enthusiasts just like you. Because what makes this situation truly historic is not just the leverage itself, it's how rapidly the entire global balance of economic power may now be shifting underneath America's feet. Global power shift. America's dominance gets challenged. For decades, America operated from a position of overwhelming economic dominance, with allies depending heavily on US markets, capital, and military stability. But today, the equation is becoming far more complicated. Canada controls most imported potash used by American farms. Europe dominates critical pharmaceutical ingredients and semiconductor manufacturing technology. Together, European and Canadian investors hold trillions inside US financial markets. What makes this moment different is that allied governments are no longer simply reacting emotionally to trade disputes. They are systematically studying leverage, supply chain choke points, and economic defense strategies. For the automotive industry, this matters enormously because modern vehicle manufacturing depends on stable semiconductor access, battery minerals, industrial investment, transportation infrastructure, and energy security. If these tensions escalate further, automakers could face rising production costs, slower factory expansion, supply shortages, and even higher vehicle prices. The era of unquestioned economic alignment may be fading much faster than many expected. And if these strategic realignments continue accelerating, the ripple effects could permanently reshape global manufacturing, investment flows, and even the future cost of vehicle ownership itself. Verdict: Western alliances fracture, economic shockwaves begin. What makes this situation so significant is not simply tariffs or political rhetoric. The real shock is that America's closest allies possess far more leverage than many policymakers previously assumed. Canada's dominance in fertilizer exports, Europe's grip on advanced chip-making systems, and trillions in allied investments tied to American markets are now becoming strategic bargaining tools in a rapidly changing world economy. For the automotive sector, these developments reach far beyond politics. Agriculture affects biofuels, semiconductors power modern vehicles, energy drives, manufacturing, and investment capital funds factory expansion. Once one part of the system destabilizes, the ripple effects spread across the entire industry. The biggest question now is whether Washington and its allies can rebuild long-term trust before supply chains, investments, and industrial strategies permanently shift elsewhere. Do you think Canada and Europe are overplaying their leverage against the United States? Could these trade tensions eventually raise vehicle prices across North America? And which industry do you think faces the biggest risk if allied supply chains continue fragmenting? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Before you go, subscribe to Piston Pundit to stay updated on the latest vehicle news, industry shakeups, and global automotive developments. Thanks for watching and see you next time. You can now check out any of the videos on the screen. There's plenty more to explore.